We're husband and wife and business partners who aren't afraid to live life on the edge.
I'm Ryan.
And I'm Juliana.
From success and wellness to candid conversations on travel, food, and culture, we're here for it all.
All right, here we go. Okay, so just to jump right in, joining us today, we have the lovely Rebecca Campbell. And today we're diving into a topic. It might feel a little bit different from some of the other things that we've discussed in the past, but Rebecca has a new book out, Your Soul Had a Dream, Your Life Was It. And Rebecca, it's lovely. Ryan and I have been actually listening to your narration of it via Audible. And it's very, very interesting. And we know that everyone else is going to want to hear about it. So tell us, how did this book come to be? I know it's not your first.
Yes, this is my fourth book. And, to be honest, it's the book that has taken the longest to write over a period of time. But when the writing came, it came very quick. And it's the only book I've written where I wasn't sure of exactly the outline before I started writing it. All my other books, it's been very, very clear. But essentially, I had a mystical experience during my kirtan teacher training. It's like kirtan is a form of bhakti yoga. And it really changed me. And soon after having that experience, I ended up moving to Glastonbury, where I live now. And over a period of 7 years, I wrote this book. And it was during a period of extreme change. Like, we've all been through that period of extreme change. Like, I don't think there's anyone on the planet who hasn't. And then for me as well, during that time, I became a mum twice as well. And so a lot of my life changed as well. So it was a lot of inner and outer change. So it's essentially like a book on rebirth and also really embracing periods of change in order to propel us into properly embodying what our soul came here for.
That's great. And, you had, in the book, you talk about how in order to really see the light or experience the light in one's life, you kind of need those moments of darkness to, kind of juxtapose the difference there. And you mentioned your mystical experience. Can you tell us what that was or a bit about it?
Yeah, for sure. So it was during, we'd been chanting a lot because it was a teacher training on chanting. And I think the thing about chanting, if anyone hasn't experienced it, they say that mantras like hold the energy of all the people who've ever chanted them before. And so there was definitely something that was happening in the room during this exercise that I stepped into the middle of the circle during the training. And my experience, and actually just behind me, I've got a piece of art, which is from one of my oracle decks, which is a depiction of the experience. But essentially, I connected with a consciousness that I would call the Great Mother, Great Cosmic Mother, and then ancient grandmothers of the earth is the other energy that I spoke to, which is really like the ancient ancestors of us all. So it was very earth-based connection. It changed me on a deep cellular level. I think mystical experiences are really hard. They say they're ineffable. They're hard to put into words, but they change you deeply. So yeah, that's what happened. And yeah, it took a few years to really begin to understand how much it had changed me right down to the cells. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And, I'm sure it's very personal. And Ryan, I know you had some questions too, but I just wanted to ask, can you tell us a bit about what the ancient grandmothers, what they were saying to you or what you felt like they were, urging you to do?
So in the experience, I was in the sacred waters of the Great Mother. And if you imagine, like, all of us, actually, we spent time in the waters of a mother's womb as well. So it felt like a representation of that. And I was shown the gates of life. So the pathway that the soul takes to enter this world with our first breath, and then we will exit with our last breath. And I saw and was shown just the polarity of the earth experience, how our grief is evidence of how much we love, and that if if we close ourselves off and down and separate ourselves off to avoid the pain and, separate ourselves off from each other, we're also separating ourselves off from the love, the joy, the ecstasy as well, and that it's all part of the human experience. And it's all part of the experience that our soul chose to have in this life. So hence, your soul had a dream, your life is it. The life is it, as in like those difficult parts of life, the difficult seasons that we go through as well, that, if we've all been through them, and the opportunity when we go through them is they're really portals of transformation. And I think collectively right now, we are in one of those portals of transformation. And what I started receiving from the ancient grandmothers, and I've been working with them ever since, is they keep on saying, we each hold a thread for the healing of humanity. Do not underestimate the one that you're holding. And that we all are like weavers of this collective web. And I do believe while this period that we're living in, you put on the news and you're just like, oh my gosh, what is happening? And, it can feel like a proper dark night of the soul for us all collectively. And perhaps there is a rebirth happening as well. And I think that we are in this kind of like period of a dark night where we can rebirth ourselves. And, I'm not going to pretend to understand how it all works out and the intricacies of, this is really the great mystery itself. But that's what I saw over and over again.
Wow, that's crazy. Ryan, go ahead. I know you had questions.
No, I think when you talk about like the dark nights and the dark periods and everything, I remember I went to like a Catholic high school, and I didn't grow up religious or anything, but I remember at that time them talking about, dark periods and like going from like a religious standpoint, but it's sort of the same idea, just periods of doubt, periods of being down and no longer having the faith in what you thought was the truth and understanding that, or becoming aware, or not even aware, but just having the doubts and everything. And at that time you're young and, but now being older, I'm 40. So it's like, there's definitely been times of that. And then I listened to you and reading your book and listening to the audio version of your book and stuff. I can fully understand the periods you're talking about. And it's interesting because, I've always sort of had this idea of like, you have those periods of darkness and those periods of doubt, and then sort of like the phoenix rises from the ashes type of thing. You have to kind of go through these periods of burning down, or just like deconstructing your thought process to come up to basically be open to learning new processes and learning new things. And I think it's great because I think, a lot of the difficulty is people just, either deciding, nope, this is what I believe, or falling off and not being open to what you say, like finding the light or coming back in. But I think a lot of the struggle is people just getting accustomed to the dark, It's like you shut off the light,
and feeling
eventually
when you're
my eyes are going to adjust, but I'm not going to see the same, So,
right.
So like what type of stuff have you found, like as far as, do you find it to be like strength in community? Do you find it to be really something people need to go through on their own to get to that other side of the darkness? Or what do you think?
So I think that there are different types of dark periods that we can go through, right? I remember when I went through my first one, which I really thought was a dark night of the soul. But I look back now and I'm like, I don't actually think that was a dark night of the soul. It was like my whole life was crumbling for sure, but it felt like a dark night of the ego or the mind, because it was like the structures of my life had crumbled. And I was just like, oh my gosh, everything that I thought was true no longer is. And, so it was like a structural crumbling. When I experienced a dark night of the soul and I started studying, it's interesting you mentioned you went to a Catholic school. I went to a Catholic girls' school.
Oh, really?
Me too.
We weren't really? Yeah. We weren't particularly religious. I always felt really connected to Mary and the Marys and Mary Magdalene, the feminine in in the representations I was given. And I think that there's a lot of mysticism actually that is in that particular form of Christianity as well. And some of the Christian mystics spoke a lot about the dark night of the soul. So like St. John of the Cross and many others as well. And when I started studying that, I was like, oh my gosh, this is what I'm experiencing in this period, which was harder than any other because all through my life, I felt connected to the sacred, to the divine. But there was this one period I went through where it felt like that intimacy with the beloved, with the sacred, felt somehow a little further away. And to me, this is what the dark night of the soul is. It's that connection that we once had in whatever it is that we believe in, whether it's the goddess, God, the feminine, if you're on a religious path like that all of a sudden it feels a little further away. And for me, that was what the dark night of the soul really was. And it felt like I was kind of like descending into my body, descending into also like a lot of collective trauma of my ancestry, of my ancestors, of the collective as well. But at the same time, what felt like was happening was my soul was coming more fully into form. And in order to do that, and so it was almost like the earlier stages of awakening, which were a lot more like ecstatic and like exciting and just like intimate and just like, oh, this is so amazing. I just could bask in this space forever. It was like those earlier stages of like the Kundalini energy as well, created space for my soul to come in more. But in order for my soul to come in more, it needed to clear the way of what was in the cells, what was in the fascia, what was here in the physical. And so it was like this ascent and then a descent and then a leveling out after that.
Yeah, that sounds very similar to what you hear with anything. I mean, just gearing up towards something great, then you often hear about like people think that it's a roadblock, but it's not. It's just like you said, clearing the way for the spectacular thing to actually happen and come to be. So that is very interesting. And how old were you, or how long ago was that this period happened?
It was probably about 5 years ago.
Okay.
And it lasted a couple of years, actually. Now, the intense part of it wasn't a couple of years, but like when I really look at it was like an arc like that. And it did coincide with becoming a mum for the first time. I think the physical act of giving birth for me, I very consciously connected to, as in I wasn't trying to, it happened consciously, as in I was aware of it, to my ancestral line and a lot of like the grief and the pain and a whole lot of stuff that had happened to women through my line. And there was something about the physical act of giving birth that connected me through that. And perhaps it was because I was having kids, I was continuing my line. And so perhaps at some level I was like more invested in that clearing in a way. I think as well, prior to having kids, I don't know if you experienced this, but I kind of knew I was connected to the core of my soul from a young age. I wasn't necessarily like doing it, but I was very like, my number one was like, I want to find my purpose. But there was like an urgency to it, like as in like, I'm going to get the job done and then I'm going to go, like it was just, it was very much like I'm on a mission and all of that. Whereas when I had kids, it was like all of a sudden I was way more attached to this world than ever before. And I think my soul came way more fully in. And I think physical, like birth can do that to you. But I think knowing that, my son, and then now I've had a daughter as well, it's like, this is the world that they're inheriting. And so I was way more attached. You guys found that?
No, I think I had the opposite.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
And I'm sure that's probably way more normal.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
and I mean, so our kids are 12 and 10, right? So I'm 40. So I was 28 when my daughter was born. And that was, unfortunately, like you talk about these dark times and everything, like I was kind of on this downswing of, I generally revert back to more of like scientific approaches at viewing everything. So I was kind of in this rut of, we're a cluster of cells. We have no purpose. We're just a happy little accident on this earth that's just a floating rock in the floating abyss of nothingness. So it's like, then you bring a child into this world.
Yeah.
Like,
miracle right before your eyes.
yeah. But it's like, I was kind of stuck in this place of like, what am I supposed to tell this sweet little innocent being that like, I think, and I was almost jealous of people like that were entrenched into religion or faith in anything, right? Because having faith in nothing sucks.
That was your dark night.
I was there for way too long. I mean, even as
But that's also Saturn returns. It's like right on cue as well of like questioning everything and what's the point of it all,
Right. I never really had that as like that like existential teenager of like, no, there's no point. Like I had that when I was later, like married and had business and had kids. And it was like, all right, what do I do? Like, how do I navigate through this period and everything? And I've kind of like sort of gotten myself out of it by getting more into like cosmology and just, because like I was always in this spot of, God and everything. Human beings by nature, we like to create storylines for things that we don't understand. Right. So we've always done that throughout history.
You mean like as a coping mechanism?
Yeah, sort of. But it's just not necessarily a coping mechanism, but coming up with answers to the unknown. Right. So like, why is the tide go up?
Because the unknown is just
there's this guy in the ocean with a trident. And when he gets pissed, the ocean goes up. And when he's feeling good, it kind of comes back down, So like, why do we feel this feeling towards people like we call love? Like, there's this woman up in the sky. Her name's Aphrodite. And she kind of, she helps you do that. So, and then, we learn, okay, well, the tide is because of gravity, gravitational pull between the sun and the moon. So as human beings evolve intellectually and we have these scientific discoveries, we kind of find answers to things, but there is still so much that's unknown about like, what are we doing here? Like, why do we have such an intense consciousness more than any other animal, more than any other being? Like there are animals on this earth that we know have love and have consciousness, like dogs or elephants or, like we can see that, but human beings by far have an intense consciousness, and not only that, but a desire to understand more, a desire to learn more, and a desire, I think, a desire to find out why there is this connection between people and the earth and the cosmos. And like, I think, one of the things that you bring in is kind of tying all those things that are still unknown together to people. That like most everyday people, like they could, everyday people, I feel like if you like jumped in, you need a little bit of background story. This is intense. This is really intense what you're throwing on people. And it's like,
talking about the great mystery itself. It's like, what?
It's intense.
And it's also at the very same time, the most natural thing in the world. And I think this is the thing about like nature or mystical experiences, for example, right? So a mystical experience is ineffable. It's hard to put into words. The way I would talk about it is entering into a state of awe and wonder. That's what a mystical experience gives you. When you're having a mystical experience, you feel both overwhelmed by the bigness of it all, but also connected to the intimacy of it, both at the same time. Now, I had a mystical experience that was very consciousness shifting, quite far out, hard to describe. But my dad, who believes when you're dead, and that none of this stuff exists, still, I know, has a mystical experience every day of his life when he he sits on the balcony in Australia where he's from and watches the sunset and looks on and is like, wow, wow. And so he's having that same level of connection. He just doesn't feel the need to try and unpack it and understand it and put words to it, you know? But that is the most natural thing in the world, watching the sunrise and set, the tides roll in and out.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's those of us who are like, but why does that happen? And what is that? You know, and I believe that the soul is connected to that our life purpose is connected to that. And there's those of us who are fascinated by that and others who are just like, I'm just going to live my life, you know, and we're all different and unique in that way, but it's like we're all experiencing the same thing. We're just trying to create meaning in what that thing is.
I think so. Previously, for a comment like that, watching the sunrise or sunset, right? Well, there are some scientific explanations to what that morning sun or evening sun does to you, and I think like serotonin levels and all that stuff. And that's there's definitely scientific evidence that they can measure that, right? And that you know, hormonal stuff can give you that feeling of kind of peace or just uplifting your overall spirit and everything. But then it's like, okay, why? Like, why does our body do that?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or then if you go, well, what about looking up at a night sky or looking at a ginormous tree or a beautiful flower? Like, what is that? And you'd be like, well, it's sacred geometry or it's, you know, like, but still it's like, but what's beneath that? And is the science proving the mystical? Is the mystical proving the science? You know, it's like,
I think, you know, half the battle, just to say, is just to be open to it. And I think, of course, there are some people that, you know, they want to be blissfully unaware to things like that. They don't want to go deep. And, you know, everyone has their reasons there's some fear there, I'm sure, if they don't want to. But one of the things that you talk about is returning to nature and how important that is for people. And, you know, you mentioned, of course, sunrise, sunset, plants, flowers. And can you tell us a little bit about, you know, I guess some practical ways that we or everyday people can return to nature and use that to strengthen our spirituality?
Yeah, totally. So first of all of our ancient ancestors were in sacred connection with nature. And that was just like a normal thing. It wasn't like a woo-woo thing or whatever. I think we're kind of like finding our way back there, right?
It's because they didn't have Instagram or Twitter.
Yeah, exactly. And so that in itself, like just living in reverence with the earth and seeing the earth as sacred, the sun rising and sun setting as sacred. Now, sacred doesn't have to be special necessarily. It's just like a word that we have used. And we've been taught to see like the sacred as this external God in the sky, right?
Right.
And it's like reversing that in a way, right? So I think that the separation, the ache that so many of us feel and the disconnection from like seeing like our relationship with change, for example, death, for example, is our disconnection from nature, is our disconnection from living in harmony with the seasons, for example. We have been taught in the West to live in spring and summer. Right? This kind of like the upward motion, the full bloom.
The birth.
Go. Yeah, rebirth, exactly. We want rebirth and we want productivity. Whereas the feminine months of autumn or fall, you would say in the States, and winter are necessary if we're going to do it in a sustainable way. And so we look at the earth and the situation we're in on the planet, and it's clear why we're in that situation. And so I think like it is of urgency, not just spiritually, but just for like the survival of humanity, for us to return to the earth and see the earth as sacred.
Mm-hmm.
The best way I know to do that is to just notice the seasons. Now, I know not everyone lives in extremely seasonal places.
We do.
In which case, just notice nature and how nature is changing, because it has its phases. But I know me here in Glastonbury in the Northern Hemisphere, today it's the equinox, which is the midway point between the winter solstice and the summer solstice.
Right.
There's daffodils everywhere. They've just like burst on through.
In general, how people need to like return to nature, not like you said, not just from a spiritual standpoint, but just for the sake of our world.
Totally. So a really simple way to do it is literally go for a walk each day. And it can be a short one. Like if you're dropping your kids off at school, like it doesn't have to be like a whole big thing. But just for a moment, notice the nature around you. So notice what season it is. Notice how, if there's a particular tree that you pass, are the leaves dropping a little bit? Are they turning? And reflect it back to yourself. So like, for example, in fall, when you see those leaves falling, and this happens to us at a cellular level, we don't even need to bring consciousness to it. But if we bring consciousness to it, we have that connection with the earth, which then is also with each other. And so you're like, okay, cool. So those leaves are falling. What's falling away within me? If you see in winter, when gardeners like cut the rose bushes back or the apple trees back or whatever it is, it's just like what is wanting to shed in me? What am I being called to cut back within myself? When it feels like nothing is ever going to grow again in winter, and I'm talking physically and metaphorically, it's
when
like what requires
cold,
gray,
cloudy, gray day, and where we
have
are.
You got one there? Do you? My gosh,
we're in New England, so it's very similar.
Right,
we're in Rhode Island.
Yes, I totally hear.
So this is our life from like November to April. It's gray and cold.
So it's extreme. You live somewhere really seasonal. So me, literally 2 days ago, I was there with you. Gray, cold, like how I put the heating up full ball again, and my husband's like, what are you doing? And I'm like, I just can't bear this winter. It was like nothing was going to grow again, And then literally today, completely different. It's 16 degrees. I don't know what that is in Fahrenheit, but it's warm. Like literally, I was sweating sitting outside today in the direct sun. All the flowers are suddenly out here. There's been a shift.
Yes.
And it doesn't matter if you're spiritual or not. You can feel that when those cherry blossoms come in and you can smell the fragrance, something changes within us too. And so just that moment of connection when you're with the flowers, like it's impossible not to be inspired, which is another word for in spirit. And so by looking at the beauty of the flowers, looking at the changing leaves of the trees, things like that, even just the sun in the sky, like we can be changed within ourselves as well. And so any way that we can reconnect with nature, we will reconnect with our own true nature because it will be reflected back to us.
What's cool is I feel like sort of the timing of your book and everything is kind of funny because I do feel like some of these things are starting to become a little bit more mainstream. And like one example of that is like grounding. People figuring out like get your bare feet on the bare ground as if it's like some new epiphany, some new discovery. But it's just like the littlest thing like that. But I think like that's definitely becoming more of like a
societal,
sort of like cool, like hit, like more of a mainstream idea. And then the idea of, do we really want to be wearing SPF 80 every moment we're outside? Right. Or do we actually need to let the sun rays hit our skin? because of all of the health benefits and, and then going back to that same question of like, yeah, there's a lot of like scientific effects the sun has and how that's good for our health and serotonin levels and mental health and our immune system and everything. But again, the question is like, yes. And like, how was that provided? How was that blueprint laid out and everything? So I think it's funny, like it's definitely like you were saying before about kind of seeing a shift in things. And I kind of feel like we're definitely in like the infancy stages of that, but I can see it catching on very quickly as far as being more mainstream. Because I think, like you said, the whole friggin' world's been dark for quite a while now. And
it's
like,
so
I think
true. We've been so
people earn
separate
for it. People want to get out of that dark. They don't want, like, people don't naturally want to stay like that.
It's so true. And even just like where I've seen shifts as well is like even things like new moon, full moon ceremonies and circles and rituals and all of that. Like it just seems normal now. Crystals and things like that. It's just like really normal.
Every day there's some name of a moon that I've never heard of before. Like I remember when I was a kid, there was a harvest moon and there was a full moon and everything. Like that was it. Like,
Yeah, every moon is different now. Yeah.
So actually on that, you are big into rituals and ceremonies, and I know so many people look up to you for that. Today with the spring equinox that I see on your social media, did you do a special ceremony this morning? Can you tell us about it?
Yeah, last night I did actually for the Sanctuary, which is my membership. And so we gathered. I led us in a gratitude ritual and then a balancing meditation where it's basically, if you think about the equinox, it's because it is that center point between the winter solstice, which is like there's not going to be any light ever again, and the summer where it's like, yes, the sun is here. Right. It's the halfway point. And I don't know, I am definitely noticing it with my kids. My daughter at the moment, she's only 2 and she's not sleeping on her own, so she's in with me. And through the winter, she was sleeping until like 7:30, 7:45, and now it's 6:15. I'm like, oh my God.
Ready to roar.
It's only downhill from now how early she wakes up,
And they don't want to go to bed because it's light so much later into the evening. So I know.
Exactly.
Yeah, we had that trouble when our kids were younger, like in the summertime. It's like, it's bedtime. It's like 8:30. It's like, it's bright out. The sun's right there.
Oh, like, I know. Blackout blinds. Yes. Oh my God.
I know, but it's just like, I don't know. It's kind of an unnatural thing as far as like natural circadian rhythms and stuff, like rising and falling with the sun. But at the same time, like you're also a parent and you have your own mental health and you need some time, especially with the kids that are that young.
So what did you do? You had a gratitude ceremony?
Yeah, so I kind of led us in a group ritual where we lit a candle and we wrote down what gifts winter had brought us. So like the previous 3 months since the winter solstice, what new seeds that we wanted to plant over the next 3 months until the summer solstice. And then, a really simple baby step that we could take in the next like 24 hours to act on that. And then I did a meditation, which was like about balance and harmony. So looking at your life from like a different vantage point, and like what feels like it's a little off kilter, unbalanced, like, it just doesn't feel like it's like quite aligned, and how you're being called to bring that into alignment. And then what part of your life is feeling really balanced and harmonious. So that was our little gathering.
That's great. And so this is part of your membership. Excuse me. So if people want to join, are there in-person and virtual events so that people can join from anywhere?
So basically each month, when you join, there's a monthly Sacred Circle, which is online. So it's a 1 hour every month, like a ceremony. And then each month on the 11th of the month, everyone gets a new practice. So it might be meditations, a course, that kind of thing. But also when you join, it's called the Sanctuary. You get access to the whole back catalog. So it's like, hundreds of different meditations or thousands probably, and lessons and rituals and ceremonies. Yeah.
That's great. And then of course, Jessica Alba, I know that you did a ceremony, or was it a tour tour? Did you do a tour with her for some sacred places in the UK?
Yeah. She reached out to me when she was visiting London. I was pregnant with my daughter, and so I couldn't make it to where she was. And I said, but if you come here, I'll show you the sacred sites. And so she did. And then she came back again, and we did another one. And it was actually her daughters were there as well. So it was kind of like a mother-daughter day. It was a spontaneous mother-daughter day. But and we also went to Avebury as well, which is my favorite stone circle in the UK.
How nice. And now can other people book like to do something in person with you like that? Some kind of sacred tour?
Yeah. I don't have any retreats at the moment for Glastonbury, but planning one for next year.
Okay.
And because while the kids have been so little, the longer retreats have been a little more intense. I do like private ones every now and then. But I'm going to be at the Omega Institute near you guys, upstate New York in Rhinebeck, for a weekend retreat in July. Yeah, I love Rhinebeck. Yeah.
They have a really cool, it's a museum, but in Rhinebeck, it's old planes, and you go to the Rhinebeck Air Show.
That's right. Yeah. I've heard that. Yeah. I've been going to the Omega Institute for quite a few years now. I love it there. Just I think the land there is just so beautiful. But I love New England. I love all that part of the country. It's so rich.
Yes, it is. And I'm going to have to look into that because that sounds really cool if there's still space in it.
Yeah, come. There is.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. The July 25 to 27th. So it's like the Friday night, Saturday, and half day Sunday.
Cool. Okay, that's great. And so, another thing, we want to talk about your oracle cards, which these are beautiful. These are the Healing Waters oracle cards. And I know you have 4 or 5 different sets now?
5, and I've just completed my 6th deck. It's out in September. I can't believe it.
Well, they're so beautiful. I love the artwork in all of them.
Thank you.
And now that the picture behind you, is that this same artist or is that a different?
No. This one behind me is from the Fall Into My Arms card, which was in the Starseed Oracle.
Okay.
The Healing Waters Oracle, the artist there is Katie Louise, who is a lovely, lovely woman. She's done 4 of my decks, including this new one I've got coming out. The Healing Waters was our second one. And she's a very gifted artist, and she's here from England.
They're beautiful.
That's cool. What the Healing Waters? Kind of funny. The other day we were sitting in a meeting with Juliana's dad, who we also work with in real estate. We were sitting through a meeting, and we were doing this meditation exercise, and he asked the group to think of a time that makes you happy and just kind of reflect on that for the next 2 minutes and everything. And I always naturally go to my thing was my little happy space is summertime swimming in the ocean with my kids. Because even when I was a kid, I always felt this way, going swimming in the ocean, you get home from that, you just feel better. You just feel it's getting into the salt water in the sun and everything. So I am going to admit, I don't really know anything about the Healing Waters and everything. So explain it to me like I'm 5. Is that sort of what it's
so the thing about water is, if you begin to kind of learn about what water is. So first of all, where there is water, there is life. Where there's life, there is water. Nothing on this planet can live without water.
Right.
And so when I go into that and talk about one of the greatest mysteries there is, I'm like, is water God? What is water? Then you look at the science and they say that water is older than the earth itself, that water came from outer space.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, well, what is water? Oh my God. We each grew in the waters of a biological mother as well.
Right.
We are more than 50% water. We've seen various different scientists and mystics talk about how water holds memory, consciousness as well. And so, oh my gosh.
Sorry, I was going to say, you've seen the experiment with people like speaking to different bowls of water.
Exactly, like Emoto's
Yes.
work, and a woman in New Zealand who's a researcher, I think she calls herself, called Veda Austin, I think her name is, and she's taken that with frozen water and she's opened it up for people all over the world to do their research and send it through to her.
So cool.
Amazing.
Yes.
So yeah, water is a huge topic. For me, I think what opened me up to it was two things. One, that mystical experience I had. I was in what I would call the primordial waters of the Great Mother, which I think was really like a representation of the womb. Then I had my son, and I had a water birth, but he was also born in coal, so my waters didn't break.
Wow.
So it was like a water birth within a water birth.
And that's supposed to be good luck, right?
Yeah, it's very, there's a lot of prophecy around that, which I had no idea. My midwives were like, I've never seen this before. What is happening?
Cool.
But then as well as that, just before I had my son, we'd moved to Glastonbury where I live here. And there are several ancient springs here, the White Springs and the Red Springs at the Chalice Well, which are, people come to those waters, they call them healing waters, from all over the world, from all different faith paths. So Christianity, as well as goddess worshipping, et cetera, et cetera. When people are sick, they go to the Chalice Well. That's where I was today for the equinox ritual as well. And so there was a lot of different touch points for me that were calling me into the waters. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's funny. So, astrology-wise, my astrological sign is Cancer, which, it's a water sign. So I think about that aspect of it too. I don't know. Are you into astrology as well?
Yeah, I am. My son his moon is in Cancer. And so, I know a bit about the Cancerians. So lovely.
So sensitive.
And I'm, my ascendant is Scorpio, which is another water sign, but slightly different.
Yes. No, it's interesting, but that is very great. That is so cool. So these, that was where you were influenced, and they're beautiful too. And so how would you recommend someone that's never used Oracle cards? Like, where do they start? We have the cards now. What do we do?
I like Oracle cards because they're physical, right? Mm-hmm. So they bring the kind of like unseen connection to spirit into the physical. Now, some people use Oracle or tarot cards for prophecy, as in like, give me an answer, or, divination is another word for it. Like, tell me what to do. Yeah. And it's like externalizing the decision into the cards. That's not how I recommend them to be used, or it's not how I use them either.
Okay.
I see the cards as a mirror to connect to your inner self. So in some of my decks on the inside, it says you are the oracle. So it's like the oracle is actually you, and you're using the cards to like,
they're the
if
vehicle.
You imagine it's like,
They're the vehicle or...
Yeah, exactly. They're a physicalization to reflect back to you. And then with that feedback, like, whether you're reading the word or you're seeing the image, you're like, oh, what does that represent to me? What does that bring up within me? With any form of creativity or intuition, I always say, like, if you're looking for guidance or if you're looking for an idea, the more focused you can be with your question, the easier it is to get an answer. So if you ask a question that's more specific, you're going to get more feedback from the cards rather than just like, give me a message. You know what I mean?
Ryan's going to give it a go. And he's going to let you know about his first experience with the Oracle cards.
But it does remind me of sort of, talk about mushrooms for a second.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, but it does sort of remind me of that as so it's kind of funny. I think that's also kind of a cool thing that's happening, is sort of like the evolution of the general public perception of psilocybin. But
right.
I've always told Juliana, because, this was like before we had met or anything, like sort of my experience with it was sort of, it was more of like an avenue to unlock certain parts of my brain, or unlock or see a connection between things, see a connection between energy and things, which I thought was really interesting. But it's kind of funny And the only reason I bring it up is because I know this is something that you've talked about and everything. And we probably don't have enough time to dive into that. That's probably a whole nother show in itself. But,
we'll just say it's nature as well.
Well, it is. It is. Okay. So, it's just food poisoning. Yeah, is it? I don't know. Because I think it's easy for people that have never done it to say that. Or people that might have done it when they were like just some reckless teenager or something, or some kid, or just not mentally in that state. But that was my experience. I saw connections and energy in nature, and it definitely unlocked certain things in my brain, or opened certain doors. I was like, oh wow, I never saw that connection. I never saw the relationship between those things before. So it was just kind of cool. But at the same time, if you enter something like this, right? If you enter like cards, like your oracle cards, for example, like you were just saying, like asking a specific question or having a specific intention, like, and maybe this is just a key to unlock that particular door. Then that's
the more consciousness you bring to something, the clearer it's going to get. Yeah.
Right. It's really interesting. I guess I don't have a choice but to give it a go.
The cards. Yeah. I have not experimented with psilocybin, so I can't relate, but I'm all about the cards. And maybe someday I'll go on some kind of, what is it? They have like they babysit you essentially, right? While you do it, just so you don't freak out too much.
Like
I'm just afraid I'll freak out. Yeah.
I've only done it therapeutically,
right.
But I've got plenty of friends who do it recreationally. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. So, I wanted to go back to the book for a second and talk about, the importance of ancestral healing, because that is something that I have heard about, but really, when listening to your book, you go deeper into it. So I just think it's so fascinating how, first of all, how we are, I guess, victims, I don't want to say victims, but victims of our ancestors' stressors or trauma, and, ways that you're saying that we can kind of tap into that and heal it for both our future generations and the past. Can you give us some insight onto that?
Yeah, totally. So it's like the good and the bad, right? We receive. And, but I think that what I have been seeing happening increasingly now is that we are, and maybe it's just because our consciousness has been brought to it. Maybe it has been happening forever, or maybe not. I don't know the answer as to that. But what I do see happening is that a lot of people are processing things from their ancestral lines. And that when we do that, I've seen it happen time and time again. When we're able to feel and process what has been unprocessed in the past, we're also able to receive the blessings. So it's not all just about like, oh my God, I have to process this trauma. Like that does happen, but we can also receive the blessings, the prayers, the joy, the well wishes as well, the strengths, the gifts.
So interesting. Yeah, I saw something which kind of related to this the other day, an article about how I guess there's like stress passed down to babies or children via men's sperm. Did not know that, but it, kind of reminds me of a similar, just the generational trauma. So what are some ways that you think we can fix that or heal that? Is that really returning to nature, returning to the earth? Is that part of the solution? I
think first and foremost, it's just like feel your feelings, but don't become attached to them, because I don't know, I think that sometimes, and I don't think this is everyone's path, but I know certainly for me, there has been a lot of ancestral processing that I've been called to do, particularly since becoming a mum. And I think part of that was, and particularly it was when I had my son as well, but my daughter, there was something about the mother line that like as she was coming in, it was like, oh, there's some patterns in here that I get to choose whether or not I pass them on to her. And this isn't to say like, oh, like my grandma, my mom, my great-great-grandma, oh, they were so bad, like, because they didn't do it. It's like it takes a long time for consciousness to be brought to something. And it also takes a level of safety in order to process things that haven't been safe to process. So, yeah. But the more, again, consciousness that we can bring to it. And then in my experience, it's been a lot of emotions that I think I've always felt in my body, but did not have the consciousness to express. Just moving them out of the system can definitely be a powerful thing to do. Yeah.
As far as moving them out, do you think, just being out in nature or just like the physical exercise?
I mean, I think it depends on what it is, but in my instance, it was like lots of grief, lots of rage. If you look at as a woman, to be in a physical body of a woman, the past 6,000 years of patriarchy with all of the crimes towards women, like we hold a lot in that. And it doesn't mean that men don't, like men have their own thing that they're dealing with. But like that's an example,
right.
you know, and not all of us, it's not all of our path to process that, but it definitely has been mine.
Yeah.
It's also not like natural, like human society now sort of like created, like going back however many years, 2,000 years, whatever, but it's not like the natural state. If you think back to like human beings as like tribal nomads.
What's not natural? Feeling the trauma?
For women to be treated the way that they've been just in society going back like even a couple thousand years or whatever. But I'm just saying, like, it just like natural human beings in the like natural state had more of like cohesiveness to their relationships and stuff in my opinion.
Actually, Rebecca, on that, also in the book, and just in general, I know you speak so much about the divine feminine and the feminine energy, and that's not just something that women experience. Like, for example, Ryan, what are some ways that you think people can lean into their feminine and maybe some of the benefits of doing that, even if you are a very masculine man like yourself, Ryan?
You're asking me?
No, I'm asking Rebecca. Sorry. Like just ways of leaning into the feminine and, just some benefits, ways that even guys can do that just to kind of make things more equal.
Yeah, so we've all got masculine and feminine energies within us. And even like, depending on how we identify, some people identify even more feminine, even if they are in a what I would call a male body. I think just like creativity, softness, appreciating beauty, nurturing people, they're qualities that we've all got within us. And if you look at the seasons, it's more the autumn and winter seasons. So it's like, what are those seasons asking of us? They're good ways to go more into the feminine.
That's interesting. And you said that before. I never knew that the seasons had associated, masculine or feminine, but I guess that makes sense with the winter, being cozy and warm, and that makes sense. Very cool.
I don't know. I also feel like sort of kind of trending in the right direction as far as that goes, even like from societal norms of men more accepted to be talking about like mental health and getting more into that and not having to be constrained by just this like expectation of what you're supposed to be as a man in society and everything. Probably opens up the avenues to be more open to being able to experience these types of things.
Well, Rebecca, this has been so nice. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Wonderful book, beautiful cards. And we're going to look into, what did you say it was called? Omega, the retreat this summer?
Yeah, the Omega Institute. Yeah.
Okay. That's perfect. Well, I would love to see you there, if not in the UK before. And where can people find you online? Instagram?
Just head to RebeccaCampbell.me. I'm on Instagram, Rebecca Campbell _author. And all my books and cards are on Amazon. So just type in my name and you'll be able to find them. Thank you, Juliana and Ryan. It's been so nice to get to know you guys.
This is great.
Thank you so much. Wonderful to speak with you. And we'll definitely be in touch. And congratulations on all the success with the new book.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. We'll talk to you soon. Thank you again.
And that wraps up this episode of On the Edge with Ryan and Juliana.
Thank you so much for listening, and please be sure to subscribe to our show on your favorite podcast platform.
We'll see you next time.